here to talk about mindfulness, healing, and resilience.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge I found as I kind of prepared for this interview was you have so much to say. And you've studied this so in-depthly. And so I'm a little bit challenged, like knowing even where to begin. And I guess for me, what strikes me the most is that people might look at you and be like, oh, well, she got lucky.
Yeah.
You know, some right people showed up at the right time. And I think from your perspective, if I'm right, it's like there's this great Taoist quote that says, chance favors a prepared mind. And that we can't control life, but we can set conditions that lead to certain possibilities. And that you, through facing various trauma and struggles and enormous hardship, set your mind towards possibilities that then allowed your life to unfold in a different way, in a more healing way, than in a way that could feel like you were continuing the trauma that you had also experienced back into the world. So I think that's just such a beautiful thing, and I think we're all in that path to some degree. We're all looking for that right mindset and that right approach that allows us to understand our own healing and to bring something out in the world that is different than maybe, I mean, we've all experienced beautiful things and hardships, so it's like helping to heal those hardships. And so I feel like, what are the things that you feel like are the practical steps that you've learned from your life exploring the impact of trauma and how to heal from that? Very long question. I figure you can take that as you wish.
Sure. It's funny, I was raised singing on stage, and so you would have thought at some point in my life it would have dawned on me I'd become a professional musician, but it actually didn't. I was very obsessed from a young age with how to handle the anxiety and the pain that I was in a way that was meaningful, that wouldn't end me in early life. Because I was raised in bar rooms, I was watching people in so much pain, using alcohol and drugs. I watched that women would compromise themselves for just a compliment in these bar rooms. And just the depth of human need for human connection and the misguided ways that people tried to find a way to connect. Being raised in bar rooms, you know, it's a very vulnerable thing as a young child. My dad was often not watching or paying attention during the breaks. There's a lot of predators around, a lot of drunk men. And I realized quickly that my emotions were my best alarm system. You know, we have this brain in this dark box, and it doesn't actually see the world. It perceives the world through these eyes, which still boggles me. Our emotions are our best alarm system. They let me know when I'm safe. And if I turned off my pain, I actually had to numb every other single emotion that I had. And that was excruciating to me, because being awake and alive in your body and feeling joy and seeing the sunrise is beautiful. And when you numb pain, you numb every other quality in your life. And so making that decision to try and stay awake was kind of the beginning of my mindfulness practice of how do I stay awake in the face of great pain. And so it's interesting, you know, when I moved out at 15, I thought, hey, I can avoid becoming a statistic if I'm very clever and if I use my intellect and I approach my life scientifically and I look at the emotional patterns I was raised with and I identify them. I wrote them all down. It was my emotional English that I wrote down of how my family handled and taught and passed on emotional languages. And then I wrote down what kind of emotional English I hoped to learn, and I began to look in my community for people that had those types of traits or tools, and I began to mentor myself with them. Often they didn't know they were mentoring me. I would just sort of stand awkwardly close to people and overhear conversations, or just tear up watching a father interact with his daughter, and I acted like I was the daughter, and I acted like that I received that love. And I did things to sort of intuitively find my way into healing, and I had I didn't quite get it. You know, I was on a decent track, you know, for a 15-year-old supporting herself, I guess. But I went about my life thinking if I'm hyper-vigilant, I can avoid the pitfalls and pain in life. And I avoided a few. You know, I didn't become a drug addict or a stripper, which is, you know, pretty much success for where I came from. But I met so much pain in my life. You know, just from being homeless. I realized at 33 that I was broke. I realized my mother, who was my manager, wasn't who I thought she was. I realized almost everything I'd been told about my childhood was a lie in my 30s. I realized I had been programmed and conditioned in ways that I hadn't even comprehended. And this was when I was an adult that I realized these things. And recovering from that was really shocking. And as I was looking at it in my 40s, I kind of went from trauma to trauma to trauma. I experienced a lot of abuse as a child. The trauma of moving out as a 15-year-old is incredibly anxiety-ridden. Getting yourself through school, trying to pay your bills and get food while you're in high school and work jobs while you're in high school, and then just, I can't even tell you, it was just trauma to trauma to trauma. And then getting discovered was such a blessing. But I had to be so on my toes so that I didn't fail, because fame is just this path people lose their footing on, and you lose a sense of your authenticity. And I wanted to fight for my humanity. If I could sum up my whole life, it's like, how can I fight for my humanity? Where I don't become a bitter person, a broken person, a damaged person. How do I become a more loving, more kind, more resilient person? And as I studied the people around me, and I lived in so many places, I had these incarnations of lifetimes within one life that it's almost schizophrenic, but I was living in the projects in Anchorage for a while with my mom. We were one of the only white families in this area, and my mom was very absent. And so you form your tribe, you form your community, your gang that you hang out with. And we were doing things we shouldn't, like stealing cars and things like that. And I looked at my friends, and I looked at that need for connection and that need for safety, and how we found safety in our group of friends, and how when one of our friends got beat up, we'd cover for them at school so that the social services didn't go to their house and take them away from their families. I mean, hard issues that kids deal with. And I looked at people start to check out and say they couldn't take it, they couldn't handle the pain, and they had no resource. And I kept writing, thank heavens, and it kept leading me to myself and to this deep well that was in myself, and to being able to not disassociate in an unhealthy way, but just to detach from my mind, to get a brain break, to realize I wasn't my mind, I wasn't my thoughts, there was more in me. The deeper I dug into this river of myself, the more I was able to see the ocean of everybody else. And it can seem like a very selfish act to spend a lot of time looking inward, but it's the most giving act that you can possibly do, because it's the only way you become available. The world doesn't need evangelists as much as they need people to live an authentic life. And when we live an authentic life, oh, well, thank you. When we live our authentic life, we just become the change that other people need to see. We become the permission other people need to see. I've never considered it my job to tell somebody else what they need in their life. I believe we each have a medicine cabinet inside ourselves. We each have the resources we need to heal and to grow and to change. We just need to get rid of some of the static that keeps us from being able to have our own biofeedback system, that keeps us from being able to hear ourselves and our own wisdom and our own intuition. We don't need gurus in the world. We need to understand that we have our answers if we can look inward and if we can be less afraid. And so for me, a lot of the tools that I developed in my life were learning how to get rid of the static. What is causing static where I can't trust my instincts, where I can't hear my own inner voice, where I can't trust my own inner knowing? And I went through so many incarnations of static, I can't even tell you. But that really has been sort of what my journey has been about. And I kept trying to find and develop tools along the way. All of them were geared around what now today is called mindfulness. Those words weren't around then. But very practical, simple tools to try and help me get a brain break and to help me tap into a deeper sense of intelligence, this greater sense of knowing that always helped my body feel calm and less anxious. And so I started to live my life saying, if this makes me feel more anxious, it's a lie. That's not my thought. It's not actually me. If this thought, this feeling, this truth helps me feel less anxious and more calm in my body, that's the truth. That's my soul talking to me. And staying in your body when you're in trauma is very difficult. You know, getting a child who's scared and in trauma to stay in their body and to teach them it's safe in their body and to start feeling when they feel calm in a room and when they feel anxious in a room There were times in my life where I literally would go, I was in a movie theater and I'm watching a movie and I'm suddenly overcome with anxiety. What was I just thinking? My mind must have drifted somewhere, tracing my thoughts back, pinpointing that thought and going, oh, that's a lie. And then I started a practice called my antidote thought, which is something I teach on my website, where I would write down that lie and I'd go, it's a lie. What is the antidote? What is the truth? What is that medicine that I need to hear? So a lie, for instance, that plagued me a lot of my life is I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a kid. I don't know what I'm doing. And it would paralyze me. And so I'd write down the antidote. Often to find my antidote, I just started with the opposite. So the opposite of the lie is I know what I'm doing. That didn't actually feel like the truth. It didn't resonate in my body and make my body feel calm. So I kept finding versions of writing the truth until it was my actual soul's truth, which was I can figure it out. I'm capable of figuring it out. I'm tenacious. I will keep trying, and I'm capable of trying. That felt like the truth. So that became my antidote thought to the lie of I don't know what I'm doing. And so I began to able to fine-tune. When I started to feel anxious, I'd go, which lie is it? My brain's telling me. And what is the truth? And I would just start to make a mantra out of my real truth, if it meant writing it down. Sometimes I couldn't even remember my truth. I had to keep it in my pocket and take it out and go, okay, I'm capable of learning what I'm doing. Like, okay. And I'd put it back in my pocket. And I began to tackle the lies in my head and learned how to distance myself from my thoughts and learn how to trust and rely on myself. And every time I tried to put my compass in someone else, I love teachers. I have had so many teachers in my life. I've read amazing books. I've had amazing people show up for me in my life. But every time I gave my compass and my sense of knowing and I put it into another individual, my life tanked. And I'm not talking small tanking. I'm talking massive loss of massive amounts of money, massive tanking. It was a very visual, okay, I can clearly see that when I place my inner sense of knowing in somebody else, my life crashes. I have to keep my compass in myself. And it's something I tell my son now. He's 5. I go, life is a forest. And what is your compass? And it's your values. And so I began developing tools for myself in my life, and another of them was this idea of hardwood grows slowly. There is no shortcut to a great peace of mind. Hardwood trees grow slowly. They have a beautiful shape. They're resilient. They don't blow over in storms. Softwood trees grow very quickly, and they fall right over. I wanted to be a hardwood tree. And so what did that mean for me? And so I remember drawing out this tree and going, okay, my root system are my values. What are my values? What kind of person? And I would do my deathbed exercise where I would pretend I was my deathbed as a 15-year-old. Look back on my life and go, who is that woman that's dying and looking back on her life, and what is she proud of, and who does she want to be, and who is that woman? And I wrote down adjectives to describe her, and I realized those were my values. And so I started doing an audit every day because I knew that if I acted every day in accordance to those values, I was guaranteed to have this compass, this true north that I was following, so that at the end of my life, I would be the person I wanted to be. Because our lives are so busy and we get so distracted and there's so many things that we're dealing with that I found this self-audit at night or once a week really, really helpful. And now with a 5-year-old being able to say, life is a forest, what is your compass? And he says, my values. And I say, what are your values? And he's come up with his own little set of values, and they kind of change and they grow. And we kind of go through every day without shame, because if you shame yourself, you don't actually get to see yourself. There has to be enough emotional internal safety and internal permission to go, oh yeah, I didn't live my value when I did this, and I can do that better tomorrow. Like what you gentlemen said about, I'm forgetting the word you used. It was what was it?
Respect.
What is it?
Respect.
Respect, yeah. Look at yourself. It's basically that. The ability to create enough safety inside yourself to re-examine and redirect and recourse every day, and the willingness to do that. Very long-winded answer to a long question. But the point I wanted to come back around to is this idea I had that if I was hyper-vigilant, put me in my head as a 15-year-old. I wanted to avoid pain. I wanted to avoid becoming a statistic. What I realized as a 40-year-old woman that was writing her memoir, going through a divorce,